Hello everyone and welcome to another Muffin video. Before we dive in here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and notification bell and drop a like on the video too if you're enjoying the content. Don't forget to join our Discord server as well if you're not already there. The link is in the description down below. We've also activated our channel membership which comes with all kinds of perks, so check that out if you're interested in joining. And speaking of channel membership, I do want to take a moment to give a special shout out to our current members. So thanks to all of you, and I hope you're enjoying the benefits. And finally, a reminder that all comments on every video will be automatically entered into our weekly giveaways. Winners will be randomly selected every Monday. So good luck, and let's get this started.
Alright, well it is finally time. It is time for us to go through the class change 3 for the Shadow Lash class, and that is going to be the Shadow Enforcer. Now, a lot of people in the Assassin class have been looking forward to class change 3 because quite frankly, class change 2 Nightweaver was a little bit of a strange class and left a lot to be desired in many regards. Now, with the high hopes that class change 3 is going to be our savior and give us a more fun experience, I'm sort of 50-50 about how I feel so far. Yes, for sure, the damage output is higher, but for those who are excited to escape the super unstable damage output of CC2, in many ways, Class Change 3 is very similar, and I can't help but feel a little bit of a, oh boy, here we go again feeling, as there are a lot of similarities in how the classes play out. Now, that's not to say it isn't an improvement, but it's not the ultimate improvement that's going to save us from this feeling. But we'll go over that as we analyze the build and get an understanding of how this class actually works. So let's take a look. This is the Shadow Enforcer, which is a very, very interesting class in many regards, and where previous classes I've said things like, oh, most of your damage comes from this, most of your damage comes from this. In this class, in this Shadow Enforcer class, all of your damage, and I mean all of your damage, comes from two skills: your core and one of your passives. And literally, that's it. And before we even dive in, I think it's important that I demonstrate this because it's quite funny when you see it in practice and you know, oh man, maybe he's exaggerating. You know, maybe the other skills do a little bit of damage, surely, right? Okay, let's see this. I'm gonna let us go into the new dragon here and take a look at the damage breakdown, because when you see it in practice, you're gonna understand, and it is gonna spoil a little bit by seeing the skill names here. But it's very important that you understand how this class works so you know how best to build it. And you'll see here as well, I'll leave the window open so you can get a sense of the burst that comes out of the class, which is definitely pretty high. Alright, so we're building up bursting, great, 90 Gs, that's pretty low. We got pretty bad RNG there actually. I've normally gone into like the 130, 140 range, so we didn't get many lucky crits there. So let's let this go for about, say, 30-40 seconds, and then we'll take a look at the details, and you're going to see right away exactly what I'm talking about. So 30 seconds have passed. Let's take a look. A few details. Okay. Huh. Would you look at that? So here we have 2T of damage from exactly two skills. Okay, well, yeah, we just got from the mount effect, which is the mount using its damage accumulation attack here, but otherwise, all of our damage is coming from Lightning Chakram and Savage Slash, and every other source of damage is entirely negligible, as you can see here. So this is literally a two-skill class. So now that we see this dynamic here, let's now take a look and understand exactly how this all plays out. So as we saw, the #1 damage output of this build is going to be Lightning Chakram, which is our core skill, and it is an AoE thunder based core skill. The entire elemental focus of the Shadow Enforcer is going to be thunder damage. So let's take a little read and understand what exactly is going on here. So we deal a large amount of thunder damage to the target area after casting, and each hit of the core skill also increases thunder damage by 20% for half a second, up to a max of 5 stacks. Now obviously a half a second duration doesn't seem like much, but if you're putting out lots and lots of core hits, this could be enough to increase the damage of a single core skill quite a lot. And you can see here the casting of the lightning chakra is not affected by attack speed. So right away we're not going to be using this tactical skill here that we've used in previous classes that increases our attack speed quite rapidly. That is Shadow Acceleration, increases attack frequency by 70%. If it wasn't for that final line here, we would definitely be having that equipped on our tactical skill slots, but we don't. And the promotion details you can see here, each additional 1% haste also increases your thunder damage by 1%, and as well it just flat increases your thunder damage, and the number of stacks that increase goes up by 1 as well. So there's a lot of focus on increasing thunder damage. So now that we understand, number one, almost 80% of our damage comes from this core skill, and we have a lot of sources of thunder percentage coming from this core skill, let's take a look at how the tactical skills play out, because as we saw, none of these tactical skills were actually giving us damage. So they are all supportive skills, and you'll right away see here there's something strange going on. Now why is this skill here at level 90, and why are 2 of the 3 skills the same that we used in Class Change 2? Like, what's going on here? And yeah, I had the same feeling when I transitioned to Class Change 3, and I sat here saying, like, you're kidding me. The 2 skills that I like the least are a major part of the Class Change 3 build. Absolutely. So one of the reasons I absolutely hate Overload State is because it gives this feeling of on-off DPS, like I said, because you're having this downtime in your burst rotation that basically cuts your DPS by a lot. Now it's nowhere near as bad in Class Change 3 as it was in Class Change 2, but anyway, so right away we have Shadow Zero here, which, as I'm sure you remember from Class Change 2, we could reduce down to 0-second cooldown and spam this during the duration of Overload State. Now because we're not using the same Shadow Form core skill, now the Shadow Form core skill actually had a promotion effect here that made this cooldown reduced by 1 second, which made this effectively 0 seconds. Now we don't have that, so the cooldown of Shadow Zero for us in Class Change 3 is 1 second. Now you can see it's 4 seconds, but under the duration of Overload State it is just under 1 second. So you might be wondering, why do we have this skill here, and why is it level 90 to begin with? And I'm actually going to have to jump out of order here to explain why. Now the only reason, and I mean the only reason, we have Shadow Zero on the tactical skill is because of temporary reload. After casting a tactical skill, increase your core skill damage by a very large percentage for 2 seconds. Now if you look at when battle plays out, you'll see here that once we trigger this, let's wait for the next round here, once we trigger this ability here, what's the name again? Yeah, Overload State. I don't know why I had a mental blank there. Boom. So you see here, it's casting fast now. This is faster than 1 second. And every time it casts, it puts a 2-second buff on the core skill, which we know is a huge, 80% of our damage comes from the core skill. So this is why we have Shadow Zero, because it solely exists in order to trigger the temporary reload buff and supercharge our core skill damage. That's why we don't have to have this at level 170, because this does not factor into our damage at all. It's much better keeping this at 90, and you may be thinking, well, why not just keep it at level 1 then? And quite frankly, I did actually do some testing with this skill at level 1, and it was not too dissimilar from keeping it at level 90, but you do get a slight boost and a little more stability keeping it at 90, and the reason is, if you look at the promotion details here, you will see that there is a difference in the level 90 skill compared to others. If you look at level 150, it says increase this skill damage by 10%. In level 30, increase this skill damage by 25%. But look at the level 90, it simply says increase skill damage by 2%. And you guessed it, the level 90 actually does increase your overall skill damage, not just the skill damage of this skill. So because of the fact that the level 90 increases all skill damage by 2%, that's why people are keeping it at level 90 as opposed to just keeping it at level 1. It is, I would say, a nearly negligible amount of damage, but it's enough there, it's noticeable enough that you want to keep it at level 90 to take advantage of this skill damage increase. So moving on, we have Overload State, which we are well aware of how this works from our class change 2, but for those who are not aware, this essentially reduces the cooldown of all your tactical skills and increases your skill damage. So it basically gives you this effect of whenever it's active, it severely reduces the cooldown of your skills, and specifically it allows us to spam Shadow Zero and give us this temporary reload buff to supercharge our core damage. If it wasn't for Overload State, we wouldn't be able to manipulate this Shadow Zero and temporary reload dynamic, this synergy at all. So it's because of Overload State that we're able to reduce our Shadow Zero cooldown low enough to keep spamming it and giving us this insane core skill damage increase. Now, our final tactical skill is going to be the Hunt Begins, which is a skill that is exclusive to Class Change 3. And let's take a look at what this does. So after casting, restores 100% energy, great, instant core skill, triggers the lightning chakram to spin, dealing an additional 20% thunder damage 10 times for 7 seconds, and increases thunder damage by 25% while active. So this is a very big reason of why our core skill does so much damage. And you will see whenever you activate the Hunt Begins, you look at the boss HP bar and you'll see it suddenly chunking down like crazy. That is because the Hunt Begins is a major source of damage increase for Lightning Chakram, and you can see when it becomes active, you'll see the blades stuck into the ground spinning like crazy. Let's see if we can get that effect here. There it goes. That'll just keep spinning and spinning and spinning, and it does a huge amount of damage. So this is part of the reason why we get so much damage from our Lightning Chakram, our core skill, as it not only increases this, it gives these damage hits for 7 seconds, it also increases our thunder damage. So very important skill. And this is our tactical skill loadout here, which exists purely to buff the core skill. The tactical skills themselves are not directly dealing damage, but they are increasing in a major way the damage the core skill deals. So with our tactical and core skill understood, let's take a look at the passive skills, one of which you already know about, in order to understand how the rest of this build works. So first off, we have one of the other Class Change 3 exclusive skills, which is Autumn Harvest. So after casting the Hunt Begins, which is this tactical skill we just looked at, after casting the Hunt Begins tactical skill, the next core skill throws 3 chakrams simultaneously. Haha. Increase the lightning chakram damage by a large percentage, plus increases the damage you deal to enemies with less than 30% HP by 22%. So right away we can see here, this is another part of our huge damage output. There are 3 instead of 1. This is part of the reason why we have such huge damage output on the core skill. So very, very important critical damage increasing passive skill that severely increases the damage dealt by our core skill. So moving on, we have the Savage Slash, which, if you remember when we looked at the damage output of this build, is the only other skill in this entire build that actually deals damage. So let's take a read of this. After dealing 9 hits with your core skill on the current target, the next hit deals an additional 220% of that damage to the target area. Plus it increases the lightning chakram damage by 30%. So this Savage Slash, basically every time you hit 9 times with your lightning chakram, the Savage Slash deals a very large amount of damage to the target area. So 220% of the damage you've dealt with lightning chakram, and it increases the lightning chakram damage. So the most important passive skill in the entire build, because this is going to be about 20% of your damage output, while the lightning chakram is 80%. So very, very important, and the more hits of lightning chakram that go out, the faster we get consecutive Savage Slash attacks. So temporary reload, we've already understood, is being triggered over and over again by the Shadow Zero. Then we have Slow Swordsmanship, which you can see here reduces the natural energy recovery by 30, but increases your core skill damage by a large percentage. Now, it kind of sucks to have a reduction in energy recovery, but at the same time, because we have stuff like The hunt begins here, which gives us 100% energy. We can afford having this energy recovery reduction in exchange for such a large core skill damage increase. Plus, you can see here when a core skill lands a crit hit, increase the damage by 5%, and again here by 10%. So this adds up quite a lot. This is a very big damage increasing ability for a core at a small penalty of slightly less energy recovery. And last but not least, we have our final ability, Scavenger's Feast makes a return. Previously, this was our bread and butter skill in the pre-class change 0 Shadow Lash, and as well we used it in waves during Nightweaver, and it is a very, very nice ability in that it stacks up this 8.2% damage increase to the same element as the core skill, which in this build everything is thunder, and this stacks 7 times. Which, if you do the math here, 7 8s are 56. This is 57% damage, which is right on par, even more than temporary reload. This is a huge amount of damage increase, and because we're dealing so many individual hits of damage and thunder damage, we can stack this up and keep this stacked very, very effectively. So this is a very, very good skill for this build where everything is centered around thunder damage. So that is how all of the skills work in this build. So with that said, now we can transition onto the next discussion point, which is going to be our talents. Now, thankfully, the talents in this class are very, 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 very easy to understand. Where previously some were like, okay, G, left, right, double, double, left, left, right, double, double, oh god, left, double, is it double, is it left, oh no, what am I doing? So, very simple. We have a single path down to Frenzy the Hunt, and then, in long fights, full left side. In short fights, full right side. Done. That's it. So let's quickly take a look though at these talents and understand why exactly they work the way they do. So Feast of the Slaughter, after you cast the Hunt Begins, which is the tactical skill for the first time in battle, you increase the damage you deal to enemies with over 50% HP by 40% for the entire skill's duration. Plus you gain 500 energy and 40 marks for Autumn Harvest at the start of battle. So very, very nice. This is part of the reason why we have such a high opening battle burst, which like I've said can go all the way up to 130, even 140 Gs if you're very well geared. Then we have after 30 seconds into the battle, there's a 2% chance to trigger Savage Slash directly every time Lightning Chakram deals damage. Now this is very nice, but it is super RNG, obviously only 2%, but it is basically another RNG source of dealing more Savage Slash attacks, which deal quite a lot of damage, so free DPS increase. Then we have Frenzy of the Hunt. After dealing thunder damage, grants a 3% chance to apply Zeal. And Zeal increases all thunder damage by 20% for 15 seconds. So depending on your RNG, this should be able to stay active most of the time. It's only 3%, but if you think about how many attacks you have going out that are dealing thunder damage, there should be enough that you'd be able to get this re-triggering within a 15-second window pretty consistently. So now let's take a look at the talents that change depending on if you're on a short or a long fight. So we'll start with a short fight. We're going to be looking at Eager Dance Steps here. The casting speed for Lightning Chakram is no longer fixed and is increased by 1% for every 1% haste. So that is a nice little increase, but is not that good compared to the left side for longer fights. But in a short fight, this does increase the speed at which you have your core skill, which is quite a nice little increase. Next we have Double Face Man. If Zeal is triggered again during its duration, end Zeal immediately and increase the next instance of Lightning Chakra damage by 220%. Now obviously in a shorter fight this is pretty nice, but in a long fight if you immediately end Zeal, that kind of sucks, because you want Zeal to last over a long period of time because you're dealing consistent damage over a longer period. But in a short burst fight, having this Zeal immediately end and immediately jack up the damage of one of your Lightning Chakrams can make very quick work of expeditions and rifts and etc. And finally, the Heartbreaker. When you trigger the Double-Faced Man talent, the next Lightning Chakram triggers Autumn Harvest immediately, but also reduces damage by 60%. So this just gives us another trigger of Autumn Harvest with a slight penalty to damage reduction. Again, great for burst, not great for more long-term fights. Now for a long-term fight, we have Precise Etiquette, which increases the chance of triggering Zeal by 14%. Holy moly! Remember what I said, this was only 3%, but now on the left side, this is 17% chance. So almost you're guaranteed to trigger this at least once per 15 seconds, which is the duration of the Zeal buff. Now the second part of here, increase the damage by 30% during Return to Simplicity. We're not using Return to Simplicity, so this doesn't really apply. Sleepless Nights here boosts the character's thunder damage by 4.5% for every 10 seconds it lasts during battle. Okay, now we're starting to see longer fight, longer duration, more stacks. Beautiful. So this is another nice increase of thunder damage. And finally, Dilating Blood Vessels. This is a long description. For every 2 seconds of zeal, the next instance of Lightning Chakram triggers Savage Slash. Wow, okay, so now you can see here, this is going to give us a lot more Savage Slash attacks, which once I get this unlocked, this is actually going to be a huge damage increase, if I'm not going to lie. Like, I can't wait to unlock this, because this increasing the amount of Savage Slashes we get is a significant damage increase. So that's the main line talent disc and what you need to run. Full right side is short, full left side is long. Now, for the other two slots, the reason we're running a hasten cooldown here is because it makes the Shadow Zero trigger just a bit faster and is more consistent in keeping up that 2% damage buff on your core skill, plus it reduces the cooldown a bit of your overload state. It's just enough that it makes it more worthwhile running hasten cooldown over, and say example, a Zealous Burden or the crit increasing one. Now for this third talent disc, it's going to be pretty much your choice. As a whale player, I find that I benefit more from increasing crit damage, but depending on the amount of stats you have access to, it might be worth instead running your determination here, or even crit rate here instead. So play with this a bit, try crit damage, try crit rate, try determination, and see ultimately which one benefits you the most. Because it really is going to come down to your particular stats loadout, which one is most beneficial. So with all of that said, let's now transition on to nearly the final topic here, which is going to be stats. Now, what stats should you be aiming for to prioritize? Obviously, as always, crit and determination are extremely important, and you're going to want to get as much crit and determination as you can, up to keeping them balanced, of course. I'd say ideally if you can reach about 70% at some point, that would be perfect. But it may take a while as we transition through the class change 3 in order to be able to get enough sources of these stats to get such a high percentage. Next up, you're going to have Haste and Mastery. Now, because this class doesn't really benefit from attack speed increase on the core skill except for short fights, I'm not going to suddenly say, well, Haste is so much more important. Yes, we do have this dynamic that for each 1% Haste increases your thunder damage. So I'd say Haste slightly more important than Mastery. If you can get 50-55% Haste and around 50% Mastery, that would be great. A little more Haste and Mastery won't hurt, basically. But again, both are very important to this damage, as is crit damage. Don't look at these stats right now. I was recently recording a video talking about stats and changed all my Mamon moves, so you can ignore this. This should be about 330% normally. Now, on the subject of Mamon moves, it's going to be the same approach as previous class changes. You're going to basically equip whatever you need to complete your stat loadouts, and of course have 3 crit damages in the main slot here, which is what I did not have. I have these determinations in because I was testing the stat caps for class change 3. So if you see here now, I have triple crit damage again, and that's a much better representation. Yeah, 330%. There we go. Now, Mamon wise, it's exactly the same pretty much. You're going to run, in most cases, your turn Echo and Sharpness of Claw. We're not really seeing as much of a benefit from these stacking pets, Book of Answers and Arcane Resonance as we have, even in longer fights. For Dragon right now, the best actually seems to be Invisible Friend, so run Invisible Friend for Dragon and for longer fights for the time being. And maybe we'll see some added benefit of Book of Answers and Arcane Resonance as we progress further into the class change. But again, this is really up to you to test and see which is giving you the best damage output in certain situations. But for sure, your turn and Echo are staple damage output, and then the third is Flex. Try Sharpness, try Invisible Friend, try Book of Answers, try Arcane Resonance. They're all equally viable. And basically that's this class change in a nutshell. So unfortunately, like I said, we do have the same overload state on-off DPS effect, but it's just nowhere near as pronounced as it was in class change 2. So it is a pretty fun class overall. It is definitely better than class change 2, but it's still not our best class change, so we're gonna not be dealing as much damage as many other classes. Acolyte is going crazy right now. Wayfarer is going crazy right now. Scholar is going crazy right now. So unfortunately, Assassins, we're going to find ourselves probably in third or fourth place as far as equally geared damage dealers. So not the best, but you know, we do have our benefits. We do deal a lot of damage. It's not the end of the world, but yeah, unfortunate, but it is what it is. So there you have it. That is a guide to the Class Change 3 Shadow Enforcer. I hope this helped you understand exactly how this class works and how to build it yourself and get the most damage potential possible. So take care, everyone. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now.